Most people think awakening is about feeling good, raising your vibration, and manifesting a better job or soulmate. But what if I told you that the real first step to individuation isn't light? It's crisis. It's the moment when everything that once made sense collapses. That identity you wore so well. It cracks. Your beliefs. They start to rot. And underneath it all, something ancient stirs. The call to become who you were before the world told you who to be. Sounds intense. It is. But that's the price of becoming real. Carl Jung didn't romanticize this journey. He knew it was a brutal confrontation with the unconscious mind, a descent into the shadow, not a flight into bliss. Individuation is not a weekend workshop or a vision board. It's a full-body surrender to the deeper layers of the psyche. And here's the twist. The very things you've been running from, your fears, projections, illusions, are the exact keys to your freedom. But only if you're brave enough to stop chasing the light and start embracing the dark. This video is not for tourists of the soul. It's for those who've hit that wall, who sense that there's more, but don't know where to start. You'll learn how archetypes shape your story, why shadow work isn't optional, and how spiritual ego traps even the most woke among us. If you've been looking for a map, this isn't one. It's a mirror. And once you dare to look into it, you won't see perfection. You'll see yourself. Raw, powerful, and finally ready to rise. The process of awakening and the collective unconscious. Awakening isn't some glamorous lightning bolt moment. It's messy, slow, and deeply personal. At its core, it's the beginning of the individuation process, where a person starts peeling back layers of conditioning to uncover who they really are beneath societal masks. Carl Jung emphasized that this path requires facing the collective unconscious, a vast psychological reservoir shaped by humanity's timeless archetypes. When someone begins to awaken, they're not just discovering truths, they're stepping into a labyrinth where ancient symbols whisper and ego illusions crumble. It's not about escaping reality, but finally meeting it face to face. Archetypes, the hero, the wise old man, the shadow, aren't just story tropes. They're living patterns in the psyche, shaping how we perceive reality. When someone dreams of being chased or finds themselves obsessed with certain figures, that's the unconscious reaching out. These symbols offer roadmaps, but the danger lies in mistaking the map for the territory. When people overly identify with symbols, thinking they're now the chosen one or a spiritual master, they fall into the trap of ego inflation. Instead of humility, they develop a spiritual ego, which is just the old ego wearing fancier clothes. The collective unconscious doesn't care about your Instagram feed or spiritual aesthetic. It works through mythological symbolism and inner dialogue. You might suddenly find yourself obsessed with Norse mythology or resonating deeply with ancient Egyptian deities. That's not random. That's synchronicity knocking at the door, inviting you into a deeper conversation. But here's the kicker. If you rush to interpret every symbol literally, you'll miss the psychological gold they carry. Enlightenment isn't found in decoding signs. It's earned through deep self-reflection and symbolic depth. Many who awaken initially feel special, like they've unlocked a cosmic secret. But that's just the beginning. True awakening confronts you with your projections, your shadow, and all the inner monsters you were pretending weren't there. This process can bring on an existential crisis, as all the old rules stop working. But here's where it gets rich. If you lean into the discomfort with patience, humility, and discernment, what seemed like chaos becomes the crucible for personal growth and emotional healing. It's like life itself is saying, ready for the real game now. So if you're feeling the first tremors of awakening, like reality is cracking and strange coincidences are stalking you, breathe. You're not broken. You're being initiated. The universe isn't punishing you. It's redirecting you. And while the road ahead demands resilience, it also promises fulfillment far beyond material desires. But be warned, just as light breaks through, the shadow begins to stir. And that's where the next chapter unfolds. Projection and the shadow, the hidden dangers of awakening. One of the sneakiest traps on the path of awakening is projection. It's when the unconscious mind, full of unresolved conflict and unintegrated shadow, starts painting others with the very traits we refuse to see in ourselves. Carl Jung nailed it. What we reject internally, we inevitably meet externally. Ever found yourself judging someone harshly, only to realize later you were actually describing yourself? That's not coincidence. That's a mirror. And spiritual growth begins the moment you stop smashing mirrors and start using them. Imagine someone obsessed with toxic people everywhere they go. What if that's just a cry from their own shadow, begging for attention? Shadow integration isn't about fixing others. It's about facing what you've disowned. Maybe it's envy, arrogance, shame, or fear. Things you've buried under politeness or positive vibes only. Jungian psychology shows us that the shadow is not the enemy. It's the key to wholeness. When ignored, it festers. But when embraced, it becomes raw fuel for transformation, creativity, and authentic power. Avoiding the shadow doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it louder, darker, and more dangerous. Spiritual bypassing is a prime example. You'll find people clinging to mantras and meditation as a way to escape discomfort, not face it. They confuse emotional suppression with spiritual alignment. But real awakening demands emotional honesty. You can't reach inner peace by skipping over your inner war. Sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is sit with your rage or fear and ask, "What are you here to teach me?" This is where projection wreaks the most havoc. In relationships, partners, friends, even strangers become canvases for unresolved pain. A man who's terrified of his vulnerability might call his partner needy. A woman afraid of her own ambition might shame others for being too much. These projections distort perception, fracture connection, and delay the awakening process. One powerful practice: journaling about emotional triggers. Not to vent, but to decode. What bothers you in them often points to what's unhealed in you. Facing the shadow is like spelunking into your own psychic cave. It's dark, scary, and sometimes full of bats. But down there lies treasure, hidden truths, lost parts of yourself, and the seeds of deep self-awareness. This isn't quick work. It takes courage, introspection, and a ton of humility. But once you begin, synchronicities start lighting your path. And speaking of synchronicity, isn't it strange how life starts speaking when you finally start listening? Synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, and their role in awakening. Ever thought about someone only to have them call seconds later? Or stumbled on a book that answers exactly what you were questioning in your soul? That's synchronicity, not just coincidence, but a psychic alignment between inner transformation and outer events. Carl Jung saw it as a sign that the unconscious mind is in conversation with the universe. It's not magic. It's the reflection of your awakening process playing out through fate, symbols, and timing. And it shows up right when you're ready to see. But let's not get carried away. The danger arises when people start hunting signs obsessively. You see 1111 and suddenly think you're chosen to save the world. You draw 3 cards and start planning your whole life around them. That's not spirituality. That's superstition wearing a crystal necklace. Synchronicity should invite introspection, not obsession. It's a nudge to look deeper, not a command to act. The universe doesn't work like a vending machine. It speaks in riddles, and it's your job to decode them with humility and discernment. Used wisely, synchronicity becomes a compass during existential crisis. When you're lost, disoriented, or teetering on the edge of spiritual ego, a meaningful coincidence can bring you back to center. Maybe it's a dream that jolts you awake, or a stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear. The trick is to treat these moments like breadcrumbs, not blueprints. Keep a synchronicity journal. Note what was happening inside you when the coincidence occurred. The patterns reveal more about your unconscious mind than any oracle could. Here's a grounded example. Let's say you're struggling with self-worth, and suddenly you're offered a role that challenges you to step into your power. Coincidence? Maybe. But what if that's the universe mirroring your readiness for growth? The point isn't whether it's real. The point is what it invites. If it leads you to self-reflection, to shadow work, to letting go of material desires or outdated beliefs, then it's serving its purpose. That's the kind of synchronicity that catalyzes psychological transformation. Still, one must stay rooted. Too much emphasis on signs can lead to spiritual stagnation. You stop doing the work and start waiting for symbols to do it for you. That's not growth, that's avoidance. True synchronicity doesn't interrupt the path, it walks with you. And once you learn to see it clearly, you also begin to see the illusions more sharply, especially the biggest one of all, the belief that you've finally arrived. Spiritual ego and the illusion of completion. The spiritual ego, perhaps the trickiest trickster on the path. Just when you think you've transcended the ego, it sneaks back in, wearing robes and quoting sacred texts. Carl Jung warned us, the unconscious mind loves to inflate itself under the guise of enlightenment. You meditate for 30 days straight, experience a vision, feel waves of peace, and boom, suddenly you're a guru. But let's be honest, if you think you've arrived, you've probably just stepped into a more sophisticated illusion. This illusion of completion is seductive. It offers certainty in a journey that's meant to be uncertain. It says, you figured it out, you're done. But the awakening process isn't a diploma. It's a lifelong dance with humility. Spiritual ego grows when you confuse insight with identity. You've touched something divine, beautiful. But the moment you make it about superiority, comparison, or validation, you've slipped from awakening into ego inflation. And now you're stuck, polished on the outside, stagnant on the inside. This happens more than people like to admit. You'll meet folks who preach non-attachment, yet cling to their image, who teach shadow work but can't take criticism. That's the spiritual ego at work, shiny, articulate, and defensive as hell. The antidote: keep one foot in gratitude and the other in self-reflection. Ask yourself often, am I sharing truth or showing off? You can even keep a humility list. Write down lessons that remind you how far you still have to go. Not as self-punishment, but as psychic balance. One practical way to stay grounded is to engage with people who don't care about your spiritual vocabulary. Talk to a child. Volunteer where no one knows your journey. Let real life keep you honest. True spiritual maturity doesn't need to be announced. It expresses itself through compassion, patience, and presence. And when you mess up, which you will, it laughs gently and tries again. That's the difference between spiritual ego and spiritual evolution. One defends, the other transforms. The path doesn't end. And that's the point. If you're still alive, you're still learning. So let go of the fantasy that enlightenment is a mountaintop. It's more like a garden, messy, seasonal, and full of dirt under your nails. And just when you think you've figured out the soil, a new shadow sprouts up, asking to be tended. Because behind all illusions of arrival, there's still a deeper law, one that governs growth with a far more ancient rhythm. The dark law of balance, the essential principle of psychic equilibrium. Light is intoxicating, but without darkness, it's blinding. The awakening journey demands an uncomfortable truth. You don't get to the light without passing through the dark. Carl Jung called this the dark law of balance. The psyches need to integrate opposites to remain whole. Psychic equilibrium isn't found by escaping pain, but by embracing it as part of the dance. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your neglected teacher. And if you keep chasing only the high vibes, you're setting yourself up for a very humbling fall. Here's what many miss. Material desires and spiritual bypassing often go hand in hand. Someone claims to have transcended ego, but is obsessed with how their spiritual brand looks. Another swears money doesn't matter, but secretly craves external validation. True balance means being brutally honest with yourself. Ask, where am I using spirituality to avoid my humanness? You can light a candle and still be driven by fear. You can chant mantras and still be ruled by insecurity. Real growth doesn't lie, it reveals. This principle of duality plays out everywhere. Abundance and loss, joy and grief, clarity and confusion. The universe operates on this tension. It stretches us so we can evolve. And ironically, it's through accepting this tension, not resisting it, that inner peace begins to emerge. Think of it like tuning a guitar. Too loose, and you get no sound. Too tight, and it snaps. Balance is found in the sacred in-between, a space where you can honor both your brilliance and your brokenness without needing to resolve either. A practical step: ritualize your inner dialogue. Create a weekly practice where you journal not just your wins, but your triggers, failures, and dark cravings. Study them like sacred texts. The shadow isn't here to sabotage you. It's here to complete you. Read Jung's Modern Man in Search of a Soul, or Marion Woodman's work on addiction and femininity. Let these texts guide you toward deeper integration, because balance isn't static. It's alive, dynamic, and messy. And that's exactly what makes it powerful. The moment you accept that awakening isn't a destination, but a daily surrender, something strange happens. You stop performing spirituality and start living it. You stop racing to become someone else and start meeting yourself exactly where you are. That's the true beginning of personal evolution. And just when you feel you've found your rhythm, a new frequency arrives, calling you to rise once again. So, now that you've seen the path laid bare, no filters, no sugarcoating, what will you do with this mirror? Will you keep chasing appearances and playing the game of spiritual cosmetics? Or will you finally sit with the discomfort and face what's been hiding beneath the surface? The journey of individuation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the noise. Are you really willing to trade comfort for truth? Because that's what growth demands. How long will you postpone your transformation, waiting for perfect timing? Spoiler: there isn't one. The universe doesn't need you to be ready. It needs you to be willing. Willing to confront your shadow, dissolve your illusions, and integrate what's been fragmented for too long. You already carry the inner wisdom, the energy shift, and the resilience to begin. But here's the real question. Are you courageous enough to trust the process when everything in you wants to run? If this sparks something in you, an itch you can't quite scratch, don't ignore it. That's the self-knocking. That's your soul remembering. So take the next step. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and most of all, keep feeling. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and stay on this journey with me. We're just getting started. The next chapter? Even deeper, even darker, and infinitely more real.